Let's see. All right, so we got some audio going. Yeah, so it's showing some indication that we're good, so cool.
Sweet.
All right, Rob. As just mentioned, pleasure to finally get together with you. When I first reached out to you, I think it was October. So your numbers then on your big 10K, run here, I think it was around 2,100.
That I had met at the time.
Yeah, that you had met at the time.
Gotcha.
And so now you're just at about 3,100, right? Or getting close?
Yeah, you're 3097. Yeah.
Woohoo! 3097, baby. Lucky number, all right. This project has certainly taken you all over the place, right?
Sure.
Because you've done some international trip now, right?
I have gone up to Canada in July. So that's
okay.
So far, that's the only international piece that I've done, but I have a trip planned for Albania in this upcoming July. But I've driven across the country 6 times. I've been out to Hawaii, and then, Canada is the only international piece right now.
But hey, you can check the box. International, baby. Come on, it's good stuff.
We're getting there.
So how did Albania, how did that one come into play?
So actually, I met this girl, Karen, through my project. She was introduced to me by this other dude, Z, who I met.
Uh-huh.
Z was probably like in the 30s of people that I met through my project.
Okay.
And then he was becoming better friends with my brother at the time. All 3 of us lived in Philly. My brother introduced me to Z initially. And then Z introduced me to this girl, Karen, who came down from New York City for a going away party of his.
Yeah.
So she and I met, and then we talked, and all of us just kind of became friends together, became a friend circle.
Yeah.
And her husband, Eddie, is from Albania. And so she and her husband now live a block away from my brother and his wife. So Eddie wanted to show everyone his home country of Albania. He's in business school right now at Cornell.
Okay.
And he was like, before I start my job and give my life to investment banking, I want to show people my home country. So just a close group of his friends were all going over this summer.
Wow.
Yeah. Which I'm pumped for. And I think about that, I don't know if I would be as good of friends with them had I not met Karen that first time, because we automatically had that connection that we had already met. And so I don't know if we would all be this close or if it naturally would have happened anyways, but she has become one of my best friends from the project.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Right. So back in, one of the reasons that we actually connected, or at least digitally,
sure,
was because this Your Connection project that I was doing that started in 2018.
Yes.
Right. So it was like, hey, there's somebody else out there in the world that's actually trying to connect with people. This is pretty cool. All right.
Yeah.
And as I was reflecting, I was just making the drive here, I was reflecting on that, and I'm like, so many of these people have just become very dear people to me, as a result of going through this process of just trying to connect with people and have meaningful conversations. And I mean, there's been significant impact in the people that I've met. Some of them have kind of just drifted off, and it was a one-time connection, met on a plane. But others have been just really, really good friends. Mm-hmm. Apart from doing this kind of a thing, my life wouldn't have been as rich, right? How has your life changed in addition to this? Have there been any new hobbies that you've taken up, any projects?
Yeah, I think so. I always say I'm going to think about it thematically first.
Sure.
My life has changed in the fact that I've become more confident as a person, not because I'm I've become more confident because I've realized how insecure everyone else is. Not in they're insecure so I can be confident, but they're insecure about things and have uncertainties. I'm also insecure about things and have uncertainties. So I think knowing that everyone goes through that allowed me to lean into it as opposed to shy away from it. And I think I became a more confident person as a result of that. And then a lot of gratitude. I have met so many people whose life paths are different from mine. And so for your context, we're sitting in this hotel.
Yep.
I grew up 12 minutes down the road. My grade school is on Trooper Road there. I'm the youngest of 3. My parents are still alive, happy, healthy, together. My siblings both went to Penn State, are doing well now. I went to Penn State. So I kind of came from that tightly knit family background. And I've realized from talking to everyone else that not everyone had that strong of a support system growing up, and not everyone had the opportunity to go to college and to have those opportunities. And so I just see a lot of things in my life now that I've realized are luxuries. Whereas before I might have thought that everyone had those things in their life. So I always think about it because I met a girl in California who had dropped out of college. And I think now people think college dropout, they're like, oh, they weren't good in school or they weren't motivated. But this girl dropped out of college because she had to move home to take a job because her mom couldn't afford to pay rent on her own. So this girl left school to work to help her mom afford to live in a place. And for me, I'm like, okay, that girl is being as strategic, if not more strategic, than I was going to college. Just she has a different route of where she needs to go. Those things. And then there are, someone will tell me about a musician. There's a girl I met 2 days ago. I think she's like 19. I'll be 29. So I always like asking them what's cool in their generation. And she was like, there's this artist, Coda the Friend, who's like hip hop, and she said he kind of sounds like Drake, and I was a fan of Drake. That whole night when I was messaging people back and doing like logistics stuff for the project, I was listening to that artist. So small things like that. And a lot of times I've heard people say if you buy a yellow car, you start to see yellow cars on the road everywhere.
Right.
I think it's just if you're exposed to one thing, you're more aware of that thing out in the world. And that happens a lot for the project too. Like I'll hear one thing from someone and then I'll see it more just because we've talked about it or because I'm aware of it. Maybe you've had the same experience, Adam.
I have spent a lot of years listening to Tim Ferriss podcast.
Okay.
And that he gave me a breadth of knowledge just because of the contacts of people he was interviewing and that sort of, I'm going to say a broad level of 1 inch deep knowledge on a bunch of different things.
Yes.
And then as I've met different people, it's been, now this one particular thing they're really into. And I'm like, okay, I can't talk 5 miles deep on it, but I can talk 1 inch deep. And now we kind of let curiosity take over, right? And it's like, oh, well, why is that? Why did you do that? Are you kidding me? That's amazing. And just kind of following some of those rabbit trails has just been really cool. For Thanksgiving, I'd gone over to my son's place. His roommates had all invited their family. And I was sitting next to seemingly a random woman. We had a amazing conversation. We didn't talk at all about what she had done professionally. Just before we left, I found out that she had been a professor at the University of Wisconsin in the English department, specifically African American Studies. Well, it just so happened to be that night I was writing an essay on this whole thing that I've been going through the last 3 years and understanding social justice, racial reconciliation issues, and all these kind of things. And I'm like, she is exactly the perfect person to give me a first cut on this essay. And it was because we took advantage of the opportunity to have a conversation and to go deep and to build a little bit of relationship. That was just something that happened just the other day. Mm-hmm. And we were bouncing back and forth with texts last night on other topics anyway. So I'm just like, part of doing this for me is let's broadcast this. Let's get other people excited about doing the same kind of thing.
Sure.
And it just opening up, hearing different perspectives. Because in my project, I've been trying to go talk to people that I would disagree with, whether it's politically, on social issues. I need to be able to look somebody in the eye.
Yeah.
And like hear, no, like this was my experience growing up. This is what it looked like. This is why I'm where I am today. And it just gives me a whole new perspective instead of just kind of thinking it's, those people, and kind of keeping everybody at arm's distance and living in my own little bubble.
Yeah, I love that approach because I've always thought about that too. People ask me like, do you talk about politics or religion? Most of the time, I don't. But I'm like, even if we do, I'm not so much interested in what people believe. I'm just interested in the background and experiences that they have gone through that led to them believing in that certain thing. So I've tried to think about it more and more, and the closest thing that I could come up with is like, take the Eagles and the Cowboys, for example. Like, I am a diehard Eagles fan, and will always be that way even if I go to Dallas.
Yeah.
And Cowboys fans are always going to hate the Eagles. And it's like, just if I was born in Dallas, I'd be a Dallas Cowboys fan. I wouldn't be an Eagles fan because I was shaped by the culture of the city that I grew up in. So I think about that a lot with other things that people believe in outside of sports because people are so passionate about sports. And like, I mean, Philly, like they fight you if you have the wrong jersey on. And so it's I can see how that would bleed into other areas of life that people are passionate about, especially like politics and religion that are so deeply ingrained in them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's cool that you are doing that with like a focus on talking to people that you disagree with. I think that's really cool because I heard a quote, so I don't know who said it, but they said it's hard to hate up close.
Mm.
I thought that's very true. Like when I meet with people, you can't help but build like empathy for them or like a certain bond with them if you're learning their backstory and their experiences. So it becomes harder to just point at them and be like, oh, well, they're that type of person or that. Because then you know about them. And you're like, oh, well, they did go through this or they did do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Read that you don't necessarily go into these conversations with a preset list of questions.
Right.
It really is just, hey,
People chatting.
let's have a conversation. Have you found any particular questions or anything useful as you've kind of had these conversations where you're like, oh, you know what? I don't bother asking these kinds of questions because that always ends up just either as a dead end or...
Sure. I always start with asking people where they're from, if they're from that place originally or somewhere else, because that gives me like an origin point on the story of who they are.
Yeah.
In my mind, I am genuinely curious about what people's life paths are. I'm just trying to build that out as best as I can. A lot of it looks like the structure that I've found to be effective for me to at least understand people is their upbringing, their education, and their career. And that just gives me like a chronological way of thinking about their life.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get to ask them like, is their career a big or small part of their life? So if it's a small part, if it's 25% of their identity, then I'm like, okay, I have 75% of this person that I don't know now because the 25% we discussed is their career. So then it's like you get to go into hobbies or why they're passionate about other things. So that's the structure that I think in now. Some of the questions, even if it's like music or something, I've asked people like, who is someone in your top 5 artists, as opposed to saying who's your top 5 artists, because if people break under the pressure and they start thinking like, well, who is my favorite? But I feel like if you give them who's one person in your top 5, they'll be like, okay, I can think of one person. Small things like that. I've started to ask people rather than saying, what are your hobbies? Again, I think people get stressed out by that question and they don't know how to answer it. I've started asking people like, what are routine things that you do in your life outside of work? That's what a hobby is. It's just a repeatable thing that you're doing. And I think that gives people a more effective way of thinking, oh, like, do I read every day or do I go to the gym every week? What are the things that I did last week and the week before that I'm going to do this week? And then they can kind of talk about their hobbies and whatnot.
It's a great question, or a great way to phrase it, because you're allowing the room. It gives it that wide open space to be able to go into.
Yeah. I always am just trying to have people not put pressure on themselves and just chat about what their life actually is. Because like I said, I'm just trying to, like, I know when I sit with people and I have an hour with them, that is my time to add as much context to the body in front of me as possible and to understand them as best as I can. I'm really just trying to know who that true person is, which is why I started asking a lot of the like identity stuff. I always tell people, if your life is a pie chart or your identity is a pie chart, what are the categories in that pie chart and like what are the percentages? And that's kind of like I lead into that with the work thing, because then it gives people an opportunity. It's interesting when you hear people say that, then how much more it opens the conversation.
And it also seems as though we're always evolving and always changing. We're going to be different tomorrow than we were today. And certainly in that, how I would have answered that question historically would have been, the work piece would have been this massive slice because I just found so much identity with that. And that's continued to decrease and decrease. And now when people ask me, hey, what do you do? I'm like, and they're asking about work, I'm like, it's I do government acquisition for the Navy. Boom. And that's it, gone. But historically, I would have been like, hey, let's talk a lot about this.
Sure.
So it's just as an indicator of how big of a wedge it is in that pie anyway.
Right.
So it's been in my mind, kind of fun to see how I've kind of transitioned over the years of, oh, this is what it used to look like. And then, these are the projects I was working on or whatever it looked like. So,
Yeah.
Wow.
Was that I'm just going to ask because I'm curious, was
Sure.
that an intentional transition, or was that a transition of the fact that as you got further along in your career, you maybe like got to a more comfortable place in it so you could open yourself up to other things? Like, what caused that transition?
It was more through some work experiences that were very challenging.
Okay.
And it caused me to really do some good self-reflection. And it's like, what do I want out of the work that I'm doing? What are my expectations out of it? And is this truly fulfilling? The work is noble. It absolutely needs to be done. The mission is critically important. All of that is still true. Mm-hmm. And then it becomes, how do I fit into that? And there were, coming through some of these tough times anyway, I was like, just started to do more self-reflection, asking myself questions. And I'm like, I think that I'm probably trying to be somebody that I'm not. Mm. And so that started this kind of cascade where I've spent the last probably 5 years trying other things. So long I tried to be the engineer. I'm not the engineer. Mm-hmm. I can talk to engineers and such, but I'm like, that's not who I am. So Ken, stop trying to be that. Go over to where your strengths are. Mm-hmm. And let's, camp out over there a little bit and allow the engineers to be the engineers. They're a huge blessing. I'm just not wired that way.
Sure.
And in March I'll be 50, and it's like, for decades, literally, I was trying to be somebody that I'm not. So it's like, okay, let me invest the rest of my life going into where strengths are, okay, and where I can really enjoy. And so that's what I'm kind of seeking to do now. Conversations like this podcast, any of these different things are mm-hmm. now an outpouring of that, or trying to go in that direction.
Okay.
And so the work has become, well, I still do lots of hours and such, and
sure,
work hard. It's just become less and less of my identity. So that wedge continues to shrink on the work side.
How did you know that you were not being yourself, or that was not your true identity? And then how did you start to work on discovering what your authentic identity was? Because I feel like a lot of people don't truly know who they are, and I honestly feel like that is one of the purposes of life, is to try and figure out who you are as best as you can.
Yes.
So I'm just interested, how did you know things were off, and then how did you start to work towards the true you?
It has definitely a process,
mm-hmm.
and there was deep dissatisfaction in my inability to achieve what I considered the gains that I needed to be able to do. My ability to hold on mentally to the facts and figures and details and be able to do calculations just wasn't happening. Then it was, okay, do I want to try to keep doing this? What feels like hitting my head against a wall, or having to work super hard to get a small return, for the amount of time invested or effort. Do I want to keep doing that? Mm-hmm. And that was where it was like, no, I don't think that I'm not finding joy in this. That was a very sobering question to be able to go, no, legitimately, I've invested all of this time, and I think it's the wrong path. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of 2018, I look back on the year of connection thing that I had.
Sure.
And I'd had 141 conversations.
Nice.
So those ranged from about 20 minutes to about 3 hours.
Okay.
So huge range in their time frame. I literally got choked up looking just through the feed and going, these were remarkable times. These were some of the highest points of my year, was being able to talk with people and connect with people and hear their stories and hear the differences. I mean, because I've got so much more empathy for those minorities, just persons of color.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, essentially America's built for me,
Sure.
a white middle class guy. Everybody else, they've got to work harder in some capacity to achieve that. Mm-hmm. So then the further that you are from this stereotypical thing, you just have to work that much harder. And so to hear the stories of people has really opened me up. And I find huge joy in that, and being able to share those stories and write about it. That's been huge. So once I kind of started on some of those different things, just as I started doing that, I'm like, this is cool. This feels like what life should be about, is that there was just a joy, or there has been a joy in being able to do this. So it's been a little bit of that. But at the same time, other than yourself kind of doing what you're doing, I'm like, I'm not aware of any career path that
Sure.
is this. So it's very non-typical. And yet I'm like, I think that this is okay. Mm-hmm. To be outside. It was probably over this last year that I really became comfortable with saying, I'm on a different career path than anybody else.
Sure.
But it's taken just time and repetitive opportunities of talking with people, trying different things that are outside of the norm.
Sure.
And trying to figure out how to put something together that way to go, oh, maybe this is the new norm.
Mm-hmm. So the year of connection was this, like 2019 for you?
So it was 2018.
Okay. And
2019, I haven't had quite the progress because
okay.
I've probably hit 50 people, you being one of them. But I'll probably hit 50 by the end of the year.
Okay.
So I did 141 last year, but I've also invested much of that same time that I would have been otherwise, investing in reading.
And by day, you're doing government acquisition for the Navy?
Yeah.
Cool. So what I'm interested because the idea of human connection and spread, I've always thought about how do you spread this to other people. For me, it's easy to say, I'm going to put my time into human connection because I have literally at this point structured my whole life around it. Like, my life path is doing this project. My project, I think, will take me 10 more years to complete. Everything that I plan to do is like partnerships or speaking about it is going to be related to the project. And so I've started thinking, because I studied finance at Penn State and then I did consulting for Deloitte straight out of school. And Deloitte version of me was very busy with work. And so I think to myself, like, how could I pitch human connection to me at Deloitte, who had like this really busy work schedule and then was tired at the end of the day? What would I pitch as the value? And it still, to me, is the same thing. It's like you never know where a connection can lead you. And the perspective that you gain from a conversation and just the general joy you gain from that are all things that are worth it. But what made you prioritize it in your life? Because you were essentially me at Deloitte, right? Like, you had this day job. You have a family.
Yeah.
What about it made it so valuable to you that you were like, I'm going to carve out this time for these conversations?
At the end of 2017, as I was reflecting back on the year, so I've got, my commute is 30 miles door to door, and I drive, so it's outside of DC, driving into the city and through the city. In the morning, it's about an hour and 15 minutes, and in the evening, it starts at about an hour and a half coming out. So working long hours at the office. So commuting, drive by myself, and then coming out all by myself. Other than my wife at home and the people at work, I'm not talking with anyone. And I don't have any space in my schedule to be able to connect or to talk with anyone. Mm-hmm. And I kind of found myself kind of shriveling up relationally. Our kids are 24 and 22,
okay.
So they're out of the house. So I'm not taking them to sports and meeting other parents. So just to be able to and have longer conversations with people, there wasn't an outlet for that. So that was why the year of connection, I was like, all right, I'm going to publicly write this stuff up and be kind of publicly accountable, if you will. And it's been fantastic when there's been a few days or a week where there hasn't been any postings, right? A friend will go, hey, what's up?
Nice.
Been a little while,
mm-hmm.
right? And I'm like, so it's been a positive constraint now when there's silence or when there's not publishing anything, because now it's like the community goes, we've been waiting on you. You know, what are you doing? And all of that has just helped me because I've benefited from every one of them.
Yeah.
In so many ways. Having some of that public accountability has also helped me. But the driver was in it that at the end of 2017, reflecting back on the year, I hadn't talked to that many people.
Mm-hmm.
Probably could not have named 5 new people that I had met in any capacity. And then documenting it also helps me for a week memory on on who all I've met as well.
Yeah, that's cool. I have always said one of the best things about this project is it has given me an excuse to sit down with people to meet, and that's why I kind of did like the how to meet or the 12 friend challenge thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I wanted to give that excuse to other people because I feel like if someone's walking down the street or whatever, if they're getting in contact with someone and they say, hey, we're just going to sit down for an hour and just chat, people will be like, no, my time is busy. But if people are saying, hey, I'm working towards this goal to meet 12 new people this year, and I'd love for you to help me reach that goal, people are like, okay, I'm using my time in a way that's helping someone reach a goal. And they're like, and I think when people see you structuring things as a goal, they're more willing to help you out or to participate in that.
Yeah.
And then there's something else that you said that, the writing about people, I have found has had a really, like, I never intended for it, but a really positive impact on my life, because when I have sat with people not taking notes or anything like that, it's almost like studying. Like, you want to make sure that you study the textbook before a test, because when you go to take the test, that's all the material you have in your mind to work with. And so for me, it's when I talk with people, I make sure that I'm paying attention to them, because I know when I leave that conversation, the only thing I have to write about them is what I remember in my mind. And so that has made me become a much better active listener, and has also allowed me to stay present in the moment, which I like. People meditate and stuff, and I talk to people because I'm like, my full focus is on them and the story that they're telling me, and I'm watching it in my mind. It's funny how similar our paths are in that way, and it seems like the structure is similar too, and has provided us with the same benefits.
Yes. Yes, let's figure out ways to get others to enjoy. Because what I tried to do, this was like literally waking up at like 2 o'clock in the morning kind of thing in a cold sweat. I need to push out a challenge, and I thought that it was going to go wildly, viral.
Sure.
Yeah, no, it hasn't at all. But the idea was similar type of thing as your 12 friend challenge, and that was 7 days of connection. And the idea was just get together with some. Completely agree with that observation on we need excuses. And that I was putting that out as an excuse for folks just over 7 days, and I'm like, the rules are as you make them, right? But it's at least something that you can own, and you can say, yes, this is what I'm doing, trying to accomplish this goal.
Sure.
I'll follow the hashtag, right? And then I'll go and like the different people that have been posting on the 12 friend challenge. So have you heard any feedback?
One of the girls that I had met completed the whole thing, and me doing it, like, I was pushing it a lot in the beginning of the year, and then I guess as the year went on, I just like fell off of pushing it and keeping it in front of people's faces. Yeah. I want to put it out again for this year, but she emailed me like a week ago and outlined like these 3 different points of how beneficial it was to her to go and talk to these different people. And so that was really nice to hear. And in my mind, I wanted to, and I guess still want to, gather the feedback from people who have gone through and like looked at my article and be like, what worked for you? Because I asked her, like, what was the best way for you to connect with new people? And I think she said friends of friends. Okay. And so I'm like, okay, I want to take that, update that article with people who've actually gone through that thing so that I can put out a better guided version of it for this year, and maybe 15 people will do it this year. And I think it's one of my mindset towards that stuff is I don't really want to push it to people and be like, you have to do this, but I want to put it out there and say, if this is a priority for you, here's a way for you to do this. Right. And I think if people see that she had a good experience or you had a good experience or I'm having a good experience, they might think, hey, this is something I should do as well. And so maybe 15 people will do it this year and maybe 30 people will do it next year. And maybe that article 2 years from now will be a little bit better than the one I put out in 2019. So I want to iterate on that.
Right.
And keep that going. But yes, that's the only feedback that I've gotten so far, though I haven't put out any call for feedback yet. But as the year is coming to an end, that's something I need to do.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What I want to use is one of my mainstay questions here.
Sure.
This is, when did you first learn the power of questions?
Really, my tech sales job. After I did a year and 3 months with Deloitte, and then I went to this startup called RJ Metrics in Philadelphia. They were like a business intelligence platform, and I was doing sales for them. And our director of sales always said we're more powerful with the questions that we ask than the answers that we give. And it was so true. And like in that environment, on the sales calls, you would see people who are new to sales want to speak and be like, so you need this, and this platform can do this for you, it can do this for you, it can do that. And the inexperience of them is like they're trying to push and sell without even asking what the person needs. And the more experienced salesperson would ask questions and just speak 20% of the time, and the other 80% of the time let the person tell them what's wrong with their current system or what
Right.
they need to do to improve. And so that was the first time that I really became conscious of that and actually put it into practice frequently. And then, I just noticed like you could have, I think about that for people who are shy or who don't think they're good conversationalists. You could be the best conversationalist and just sit back and ask questions. Like you just have to sit back, ask a good question that someone will take and run with. And then when it's time, you ask another one. And you could speak like for an hour. There have been times where I've probably spoken 10 minutes and other people speak 50 minutes. And those people walk away from that conversation thinking that it was an awesome conversation and that I was a really good conversationalist because I gave them the opportunity to speak about themselves the whole time. So, sales, a lot of what I did in my sales career translated into the career path that I'm on now, just meeting people, and that was a big way for it.
Nice. When I was in the drive thinking about when you reach 10,000, you're probably going to you're going to go through some kind of withdrawal, right? I mean,
sure.
Because if we're going 10, 12 years or however long it's going to take you to get all the way to the end, I'm like, there's no way you can stop this on a dime.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to at a minimum, keep having conversations and such. Have you considered at all on what that end state looks like? Obviously, life will be completely different, I would assume.
Yeah, so I'll be 29 next week. I see the project taking 10 more years to complete, and in that time, I'd love to find a wife, get married, have kids. And also, I want to start speaking about the project this year. That's one of my big focuses.
Okay.
Because I see that as a good way of me being able to support myself throughout the 10 years and then even afterwards. So 10 years from now, say I complete the project, I think I'd like to continue meeting one or two people every day. And then I want to teach about human connection at a local university. So I think that, and that's maybe something that I start before the project's over too, but I think there should be a freshman seminar where students are given the space to connect with and learn from each other's backgrounds as opposed to a textbook or a PowerPoint slide. At the very least, I think if we're requiring students to take general education courses, I am convinced that freshman seminar would be as valuable, if not more valuable, than those general education courses because you're giving students the ability, especially for the younger generation too, you're giving them practice looking each other in the eyes and having a conversation, the practice of actively listening to someone else's story, of telling theirs in a way that makes sense. And then beyond that, you're creating these bonds that could turn into future friendships, relationships, business partnerships. So that's what I have a big focus on wanting to do that. Yeah, so those I think are the three areas, speaking, teaching, and then continuing to meet. Because you're right, I don't think I wouldn't want to stop this on a dime, and I don't look forward to the day that the project is over because I get so much fulfillment now progressing towards the goal that once I hit 10,000, I'll have to throw another goal ahead of myself to have that same fulfillment of working towards.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Yeah, I think that I'll be able to figure that out along the way. But I'd like to continue meeting people because I tell people all the time, like, if I had millions of dollars, this is how I would want to spend my time anyway. So I'm in no rush to do it. Like, I like the pace that I'm going at. As long as I can get to financial stability, then I'm like, okay, I'm good. Like, I'm doing what I love.
That's fantastic. Love that idea of the freshman class, of looking people in the eye and having these conversations. You know, this isn't bashing millennials or the gen or anything like that, but it's just with our drive to technology or in our dependence on technology and looking at thinking, okay, this is our connection is really through texting or whatever that is, we really are missing out on that. The ability to connect, looking at somebody in the eye.
Sure.
And looking at seeing how they're responding to our tone. And you miss so much just if it's in a text versus engaging with the human on the other side.
Sure.
So, yeah, that would be remarkable.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting with the continued rise or push for education being more and more online. And, you know, it would almost be like, okay, you need to figure out a local cohort, right? You do everything else online, but there needs to be something where you're actually engaging with other humans.
Sure.
And having that connect or that opportunity anyway to figure out whether they're in a good practice or whatever it looks like anyway.
Yeah. I met this dude in, where did we meet? Orlando. And he was very big picture thinker, but he was saying with cell phones, he's like, IQ doesn't really matter that much anymore because you have all the answers in your pocket. He's like, the next big measurement that's going to matter is emotional intelligence. And I was like, yeah, that's actually a really good point because it's true. You or I could have the question on the same thing and look up the answer on our phone. It doesn't matter if you know it in your head or if I have to look it up. We still have the answer. But to be able to interact with someone and have personal interaction and do it in a positive way, I think is going to become a highly valued skill.
Yes. Probably become more and more rare in that it will require intentionality to go get that skill.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because you're just not going to fall into it because we can just continue to keep doing the technology-based things. And that so when you were talking about when you mentioned the phone, I thought that you were going to go in the direction of video conference, doing the video chat. But then, so what popped into my mind was that when you're looking at a phone, you're still not looking people in the eye because you're looking at the camera, which is, so there's still a disconnect of inches or feet if you're on a big screen. Whereas across the table, it's like, no, I see you. And to your point, as you were talking about earlier, being fully present, it allows for that practice of, turning the phone over, setting it off, or whatever that looks like anyway to, let's be here. This is what we're doing. We're spending time together.
Yeah. Yeah, the environment makes a huge difference. And people have asked me, like, do you do Skype meetings with people? I'm like, no, I don't. I just want to sit with people and I want to sit with them one-on-one. And I want to get to know them. Even, like other people too have been like, come to my party, you'll meet 10 people at one time. And I'm always like, I don't want to meet 10 people at one time. I actually want to spend the time, like, I want to know who you are. And I want to know that the next time I see you, I'll be like, okay, I know Ken. Like, I know his background.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have there been any particular surprises that have kind of hit you out of left field? You're like, I had no idea this was coming.
Sometimes in terms of people's stories. The one dude, I talk about him a lot actually, but he was a hotel concierge in Philly. Young, like, white dude, and I was just like, oh, he probably grew up in the suburbs like me. He's probably from, like, the Philly area. Just things that were going through my mind before I actually talked to him. And then when we spoke, like, he had an accent. He was half German, half South African. Was raised in Nigeria and then Romania, and when he was living in Romania, he went boating on the Hudson River with some friends and, like, fell off of a boat, got run over by it. His legs got sucked up into the engines. Yeah. So He
Wow.
lost like 5 of 6 liters of blood and technically died and was brought back to life. And I was just like, oh, okay, I could not have been more wrong about what this man went through. And the same thing, like I remember meeting this girl for the project at a bar in Old City, and same thing, I was like, she probably went to like a high school like mine and whatnot. And then when we talked, she was telling me about how she was involved with social work and how she doesn't judge other people for like their methods of coping or what they're going through, because I think when she was like 13 years old, she had been gang raped, and to cope with that, she fell into like a cocaine addiction, and she pulled herself up out of that and then used her past to go into social work to help other people who had been through like similar situations. And so again, I was like, wow, it kind of felt like a punch in the gut, and felt guilty for even thinking that I could know what someone's story was before sitting down to talk with them. I got better along the way of just trying not to assume who someone is and letting them tell me who they are. Because I feel like I had good intentions in the beginning of this project. I would try to assume who someone was and then try to like say things that I thought would connect me to that version of them that I had built up in my mind. But then I learned to just sit back and like, no matter what someone looked like or where they came from or whatever, let them tell me who they are and then just connect with that version of them.
That's a powerful statement. Yeah. I've thought before on any of my best friends now were a stranger at one point. And because I've legitimately made some amazing friends just out that were strangers here over the last year or two, and the impact that they've had in my life, I'm like, anybody that I'm passing on the street has the capability or the possibility of becoming my new best friend. And I just pass them by or, stare at my phone in line. I was at the funeral for Elijah Cummings, and I just started a conversation with the woman in front of me, Andrea. Didn't know her, but we spent like literally 3 hours talking, going through the opportunity to see Representative Cummings lying in state. We walked outside. We walked down to the metro together. I mean, it's like literally, apart from taking advantage of the opportunity to start a conversation. She's a Howard University graduate, worked in county in Maryland, worked in their government or works in the government. Just like, she's an amazing woman. And it would have been so easy just for me to stare at my phone and go, how come this line isn't moving faster?
Sure.
So, yeah, people are amazing. And I love your point of just not coming in with any preconceived notions. Because you look like this, therefore I know all about you, and just coming in and accepting people for who they are.
Right.
That is powerful in today's world of divisiveness.
Sure.
Wow.
Yeah, and I have noticed the same thing, that I have connected with a lot of people who I've noticed just from that hour that our personalities got along really well. And I thought, if given the same amount of time, like I have very close friendships with my close friends. Like they're like family to me. And so, but I've met people who I'm like, I wonder if I had the time that I had at Penn State with my close friends and all those memories, if I would be just as close with those people. Because a lot of it, I feel like, is you have these personality clicks, and then it's just fostering that over time. I think time is the big constraint for people not being able to have like as many best friends, or like all the best friends or whatever. I've come to believe that most people in the world are just like a certain level of cool. Like we're all like pretty much in this social norm, cool like area that we could all get along with each other. If given, like those relationships could be stronger and stronger if given time together. I met a dude, Cal Fussman.
Yep.
I met him when I was in Los Angeles, and we did a podcast episode together. And the first 2 times the audio was like didn't come out correctly, and so we had to do a third podcast episode together.
Oh, hold on just a second. Let me mash this, and so I get a round 2. I'm just playing. Right? Yeah. Keep going.
He was saying, I think it was the second time we met up, something that like it takes 90 hours of time together for people to feel like they're actually good friends. And I thought that was really interesting, because before that I was thinking in my mind, the formula for friendship was like some type of foundation and then frequency of interaction. Where it's like with these meetings, I noticed that if I met someone, that was the foundation. If I saw them more and more afterwards, I felt more and more comfortable with them, considered them more and more like a good friend. And then if I think back to my college days, it's like I met someone through a club, and that was the foundation. And then like I saw them for meetings, and then I saw them out for parties. And through all of that time, we just built these really close bonds.
It may have been on your interview with Cal where I heard that 90 hours.
I think, yeah.
And I was just like, 90 hours is a legitimately long time. If you think on, oh, well, let's get together for coffee, once a month because you're my longtime friend from college or whatever, or you're trying to build a friendship, it takes effort. And if you're doing it an hour a month, you're looking at years before you're able to kind of get to that point. When I heard that number, it was staggering. Maybe on that same one or the same discussion where it was, that's why these long weekends together. So if you go to Burning Man, right, or you go to something anyway where you spend multiple hours together, then you can kind of compress that, quote, good friend time or whatever it is anyway, and get that down time-wise anyway, to be able to get those hours in. Because, and allowing life to happen.
Sure.
Right? And the good and the bad, and funerals and weddings and those kind of things as well. Mm-hmm. And vulnerability, transparency to be able to share what's legitimately going on.
True. Yeah. I've seen that with my friends as well. Like, a lot of my friends got married in the last 2 years, and going through major life events alongside them brought us all a lot closer. So that was cool. Cool to just see and observe. I think it's funny. I think going through life, like, you always feel like you're the first one to ever experience what it's like to have a friend who's getting married. Or like you're the first one to ever experience what it's like to have a friend who's going to have a baby or something like that. Which obviously you're not, but that newness I think is really cool, that everyone gets to experience that newness in their life, and like that first time.
Are there any particular places or stories or anything like that you want to hear, or that you'd like to go visit for any particular reason or anything like that?
Just like I'd love to get abroad to just different countries in general. I'd like to get to places that are different from cultures that I know. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of like, I largely live my life without expectation. That way everything is a surprise. So that's kind of like my mindset towards it. I think with travel, it's so typical of us from the States to think like Europe as a cool place to go, but I would love to get to like Africa, Asia, like South America. I've met a lot of people who are well traveled, and some of their favorite countries they'll be like Pakistan for this reason. Like that wouldn't have been the first thing that I've thought of, but I've come to understand that some of the coolest places are probably places that I never even thought of going, which is kind of why I'm excited to go to Albania this summer. Because I knew nothing about Albania 10 years ago. And now I've met a handful of Albanians through my project. And it's like, for some reason, that country is becoming more and more a part of my life. And I know it's like near Italy, and like the beaches there are supposed to be really beautiful. But I couldn't tell you like much about the country, so I'm excited to learn about it. Yeah.
When I moved down, I got out of the Navy, moved down to the D.C. area, worked for Hughes Network Systems, and the first guy that I really connected with was a guy named Ray Naimunde. He is from Zimbabwe. Okay. So he was in my class as a student. So he's over, I think it's Austria. Since that friendship, and it was so pivotal for me when I first moved to the area, Zimbabwe has been on my heart, even through all the upheaval that they've gone through over the last decades. Similar with your Albania, it's connection there, and it's like, let me follow that. Let me trace it back to its roots a little bit.
Sure.
And go back. Anxiously anticipating the opportunity to actually make it over to Zimbabwe sometime. And
nice.
One of his friends was over here getting the same kind of training. So it just worked out through a bunch of other circumstances. We ended up sending back a bunch of our kids' toys because they had kind of just grown out of that phase anyway. And he was just having a baby. So this was his buddy. And so we shipped all this stuff, got it back to him. And it wasn't poor Africa. It wasn't that at all. It was, dude, let me hook you up with all this stuff. This is just fantastic. So to know that, his kids were playing with these toys that we had that my kids played with. Right? And it's just, the personal connection thing has just been fantastic. That's definitely on my radar at some point to make it out to. Yeah, Zimbabwe.
Nice. So were you in the Navy, prior to doing the government acquisition?
Yeah, I did 9 years submarine radioman.
Okay.
Spent all that time up in Connecticut, Groton, Connecticut.
Okay.
It's the submarine capital of the world, or at least for the U.S. anyway. Went from Arizona, did boot camp in Great Lakes, then did all my schooling there in Groton, and then was stationed in Groton.
Okay.
And then actually met my wife in the shipyard when the submarine was being built.
Okay.
And that was in '91, and we're still married today. So
nice.
Yeah, the Navy's been good to me. It put a lot of food on the table, and I got a wife out of the deal, and kids, and all these other things.
So did you go straight out of high school?
Yep.
Nice.
Yep.
So what caused you to do that? Like, did you have military in your family, or what inspired you to go into the Navy?
A friend of mine, he had joined the delayed entry program early on in high school, and so that was his plan. And then I didn't apply myself in school. I was always working a bunch of different jobs, and my dad didn't have any money, so I didn't even consider the possibility of grants or scholarships or anything like that. I was like, I automatically disqualified myself. Probably the wrong thing to do. For anybody listening, please go look at possibilities, right? But he was so confident in what he was doing. I was like, I'm going to go do this because this is great. Mm-hmm. And that was what took me in the direction of the Navy. And then the only reason I went submarines is they said, hey, we'll give you an extra $30 a month to go submarines. Are you interested? Yeah. And that was why I went submarines. And then, so it was a new construction submarine that was being built. And then did 4 years on the boat total, but then 3 years at sea. So it was a year in the shipyard before it went out to sea. Then went through all the trials, and eventually we did a Mediterranean run. So that was cool. And all up and down the East Coast.
Wow.
Getting to see a bunch of ports there.
So you were in the submarine, for 3 years on the sea?
Well, no. So there's essentially two different kinds of submarines.
Okay.
You have the boomers, or the big ones that have the missiles on them.
Okay.
So you've got those. And their whole mission is to not be in port. So when the bad guys looks around, they know how many we have in existence. And if they look and they go, there's only 50% of them in port, that means the other 50% of them are out at sea, and they could rain down on us if we do something stupid.
Right.
So that's their whole purpose. And they have a regular 60 to 90 day in and out thing.
Okay.
I was over on the fast boat, and this is the kind of boat that goes out, and back on the bigger boats, if they hear something, traditionally they'll turn and go the other way, because their whole purpose is just not to be found.
Okay.
And just not known. Nobody knows where they're at. Then on the fast boat side, those are the more aggressive type, and if they hear something, they'll go after it or follow it. But as a result, the schedule is far more erratic. You could go out for a week, out for 2 days, and doing exercises or whatever, and you'll also hit far more ports. Whereas with the big submarines, they don't do a lot of port calls. Where
Right.
the smaller boats, they'll pull into the various ports just to show a presence. So that was where we did the med run. We went over to the Mediterranean and hit several ports over there. And that was the boat that I was. So if you ever saw Hunt for Red October or any of those, that's that kind of boat where it's that the mission is to be out there and following folks and going after them if need be.
Gotcha. And you were doing that.
So I was a radioman.
So you cruising under the water that whole time? When you're moving around?
Yeah, most of the time. Yeah.
Interesting. It's gotta be. I've never done that, had that as an experience, so I'm sure you get used to it over time. But it's gotta be interesting, moving through the ocean underneath the water.
You feel, depending on how fast you're going, there's a little bit of a rumble, right? But otherwise, most of the time it's just very stable.
Sure.
You're not noticing where you're going, and you generally go, dive and rise anyway at relatively modest rates. So it's not like crazy stuff is happening. Now, there's exercises and situations where, we'll put it through its paces, but for the most part, it's very stable.
Mm-hmm.
And like I say, at the faster speeds, you'll feel a little bit of rumble. So that's pretty cool. One morning, we'd surfaced early in the morning and come into Long Island Sound up to Groton. We got off the boat 10 o'clock in the morning, and I was had stopped at like a CVS or something like that, and sitting at the stoplight, getting ready to pull out onto the road. And I was like, I started the morning as a lookout, looking out over the ocean on a submarine coming into port. Mm. And now I'm sitting here and I'm like, nobody else started their day the same way I did.
Yeah.
Moments like that are very vivid in my mind to go, that's cool work. Mm-hmm. Amazing work. Yeah. And appreciate the work that, all those on the front lines are doing, both men and women. So it's been, so it was a good time.
So you did that for 9 years and then...
9 years, yeah.
And then did you move down to DC after that?
Yeah, so I went from on the boat, and then I taught at sub school. Okay. Taught radioman there for 4 years, and then got out. I figured that I was going to be the one guy that was going to get out, make $100,000 without a college degree. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it didn't happen. Okay. Yeah. It did not happen that way. Yeah, started working at Hughes Network Systems as a technical trainer for them on satellite communications equipment. And then did that for 4 years. Got a chance to do some travel there, which I really enjoyed. And then 9/11 happened, and got laid off. Okay. And then got picked up as a contractor supporting the Navy. And then 7 years later, went government. But gotcha. Since 2002, I've been down by the Navy Yard. Okay. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that's cool. It's cool life path and stories, and I'm sure you have stories for days for your career and like the things you've seen.
Yeah, life has been full.
Yeah. No. That's cool. I'm sure you've heard a lot of great stories too from other people who you've met.
And that's certainly at this point what energizes me. Anytime that I'm writing up about somebody, I know my story, and I'm like, all right. So there's some kind of cool things, whatever. But this is what's unique to me is hearing the other story and getting a glimpse into their world for the trials as well as the victories. That has just been, to me, remarkable. Yeah. Just greater appreciation for who people are, their lived stories, work that we've got to do in this country, very much at the forefront of my heart.
Right. Yeah, likewise. It's cool. I like the idea of building empathy. I think conversation is a really good way to do it.
Yeah, that it has been. Looks like that we are up with our hour. This is Rob, Lawless. What would be some ways for them to reach out to you, learn more about you?
I largely keep track of my project on Instagram, and my handle is @robs10kfriends. I also post to Facebook, but most of the things I do is through Instagram. And that's where people can reach out to me or through my website. In the last 6 months, I've had a good amount of press, which has been awesome for the project.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I try my best to get back to people. That's been like, this week I'm taking it light meetings and then trying to get back to people. But I've probably got like 500 messages in the past 2 months. So it's funny. I had a girl comment yesterday and she was like, you just don't want to meet me. And I was like, it's not that. It's that you are like number 300 and 500 messages that I need to get back to. People can find me there. They can message me there. If I take a little bit to get back, that's why. But I do want to meet everyone who reaches out to me. If they're not in like, I'm in Hoboken for the next few months. If they're not in that area, like, I do plan to travel once I can afford to do so. And I want to meet people where they are. But until then, they can follow along on the account if they're interested in it.
And the requirements for someone to meet you are what? Any particular personality type? Any particular kind of person?
No, just a one-on-one, 1 hour conversation in person. That's it. Like, whatever background, whatever age, race, religion, anything like that. I am just there to meet people.
Cool. All right, we're going to wrap it up from here. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.